Now that we've covered Cliff Amore and what the expectations for next year's team are, I want to jump backwards to the first two guys that committed, the two mid-major transfers that Alabama picked up, because I don't think that we should skip over those guys. And then I'm saving the potentially the most controversial for last. The two mid-major pickups that Alabama received was Houston Mallette and Chris Youngblood. Houston Mallette, much more of a smaller body size guard wing that is a really, really good shooter that has an elite pull-up and spot-up game. And over the last 3 seasons, he's averaged over 13 points a game. He is shooting 38% 2 years ago, 33%, and then 41% this last season from 3. He is a guy who has a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, gets 3 rebounds a game. He is a guy that I think has the ability to defend. He was probably not called on it to do it quite as much at Pepperdine as he will be at Alabama. We know how Nate Oates stresses defense. He did average almost 1 steal per game, but it is not, he's not an elite defender by any stretch of the imagination. But I think his game is going to thrive in transition. I think that his game is going to thrive in Alabama's multi-guard, multi-wing system that likes to get up and down, and he's going to get plenty of open looks. And I think that similar to Latrell Wrightsell, it would not surprise me if Mallette turns out to be one of the better shooters that Nate has coached. Wrightsell coming into Alabama was not the level of shooter that he was this past season. At least he didn't look like it on paper, right? On paper, Latrell Wrightsell was not an almost 50% shooter. He was not a 100% free throw guy. That's what we saw during the season. What we saw during the season was a high 40% three-point shooter that every time he released the ball, you thought it was going in. He was 100% from the free throw line throughout the course of the entire season. And he was a guy that we relied on a ton. You saw what happened when he went down with the head injury. It really hurt Alabama because of how much they relied on him to be a backup ball handler in certain situations, and at a minimum to be a guy that knocks down open shots. I think that is a pretty ideal role for what I would think of Houston Mallette. I don't think he's going to be a primary ball handler. I think that if Sears is back, he's going to be that guy. The transfer we're going to talk about here in a minute, Aiden, I think he's going to be that guy. I would not expect for Houston to be a primary ball handler, but I would expect for him to be able to handle it if the situation arises and to be able to knock down open shots. That's going to be his goal in this team. 3-and-D, right? Knock down open shots, defend, get rebounds, and just play in the flow of the offense. And I think that he has shown in his abilities at Pepperdine over the last 3 seasons that he can absolutely do that. He's 6'5", 185, so a little bit smaller body type, but 6'5", longer guy, especially to be playing the 2-3. And I think that he will be a really big addition to this team. And like I said, my archetype for how I would expect him to play is something of the Latrell Wrightsell ilk. That's how I would, ideally think that Houston Mallette's going to play. Not expecting them to be carbon copies of each other, but that's who I think the two guys are going to be modeled after. Then, when you go to Chris Youngblood, much different build. Chris Youngblood is 6'4", 218, so just a sturdy guy, really physical guy that is not afraid of contact, plays through plenty of contact, doesn't really get hurt. The Southeastern 14 guys looked it up. He's only missed 1 game in 4 seasons. I mean, he's played 24 games in 2020 during the shortened season, 30 games in 2021. I think that's the season that he missed a single game. 35 games in 2022-23, and then 33 games this last season. He's played 140 games. He has averaged over 12 points all 4 seasons he's played in college basketball. The first 3 seasons he played for Kennesaw State. And then when his coach was hired at South Florida, he followed his coach, went to South Florida, went with him, and went on to score 15.3 last season. Got, about 2.5 rebounds, 2 assists, and was the co-Conference USA player of this, co-American player of the year. And, just was huge, right? He's originally he was born in Tuscaloosa, so there are some ties back to Alabama that are big. He is a elite three-point shooter as well. He has shot over 40% the last 3 seasons, shooting last season just under 42, right? But he's a much different style guy than Mallette. He's going to be much more physical, play a little bit more around the rim as well, not being able to be pushed off of contact. Again, because he's 6'4", 220, right? He's built like a linebacker, right? This is a guy that is not going to be pushed off the block, is not going to be bullied, and is going to be able to kind of handle whatever the defense throws at him. And I think that having a veteran guard that's played, 140 games of college basketball almost, it's huge, right? Or 130 games of college basketball. It's just huge because you've got a guy that knows what is expected of him. He knows what it takes to succeed in college basketball. He's moved conferences. He's, moved schools. He understands what it takes to assimilate into a new group. He knows what it takes to move into a higher level of competition because when you move from Kennesaw up to South Florida, that's a better level. Those are going to be more difficult guys you're playing against. Now moving into the SEC, it's even more difficult, even, better level, right? But he's already done it. So I think that Chris Youngblood is going to be a huge addition. I think that with his size and physicality, he's going to bring something that I don't think that most of the other guards that Alabama's had in years past have had. When you think of the Jaden Shacklefords or you think of Javon Quinterly or even Rylan, you're not thinking of bigger physical guards that can really, take contact. Sears is pretty good about it, especially, he's built a little bit more solid and plays through contact better. But I think Youngblood is going to give you the best version of that Nate Oates has had while he's been at Alabama. Youngblood is that physical specimen from a size standpoint that I think he's going to be able to give us something that we have not had, and I would expect him to play huge minutes. Like I said, Alabama can absolutely find a spot for a guy that's shooting 40% from 3, 83% from the free throw line, has the ability to average, pretty good rebound numbers. When he was at Kennesaw, he had 5.2, 4.7 rebounds, right? So it is an adept rebounder, but, it is a scorer at heart, right? Alabama absolutely can find a spot for that guy, and I would expect that Youngblood and Mallette both are going to play very key roles in this upcoming season.